Hello there, welcome. Today I'm creating a double page layout featuring the Gathering Together designer series paper from Stampin Up. It's such a beautiful fall inspired collection filled with rich seasonal colors, leafy prints, and mixed with subtle textured patterns. These are the photos I'm documenting today. My husband James and I went on a fall hike to a small mining town not far from home. This photo was taken from our vehicle at the top of what's called Scenery Hill. You can see the mountainscape and all those gorgeous trees showing off their autumn color. James actually drives this route every day to work, so this is the view he gets to enjoy often. Lucky guy. The rest of the photos are from our hike. I've also included a few shots from an old abandoned mine site. And this one here shows the map of the trail we followed. And this last photo is the view I managed to capture on the hike. Turned out pretty good, even if it wasn't quite what we were expecting when we set out. Along with this paper, I'll be using a few favorite stamp bundles, and I'm excited to share a couple of brand new products that will be part of the online exclusive release coming in November. Looking at these photos, I see lots of green tones mixed with yellows, browns, and just a few hints of red, which leads me straight to this pattern paper here. It ties all those colors together beautifully, and since we were surrounded by trees, I'm choosing this wood grain kind of, it looks wood grain to me. It has that neutral, warm tone that's perfect for outdoor photos. Then I'll mix in a subtle brown tone-on-tone pattern for texture and a pop of Cajun Craze to bring out those red tones in the photos. I'm really excited to get started, so let's clear off my workspace and bring in some white Willow cardstock for my base. So I have 12 photos I'm documenting today in several different sizes. Now, normally I like to place my favorite photo on the left, but this time I'm switching things up and my scenic view photo is going to go on the right. It is an odd size, 5.5 by about 3.5. It's just the way that I cropped it. I didn't want to see the dashboard in the photo. On my left, I have a 5x4 portrait. This is of my husband, James. And then along the right edge, I'm creating a column of 3x4 photos. This layout style is one of my go-tos when I have multiple images. It lets me include several photos in one area without overwhelming the page. I'll balance that with another 5x4 portrait on the left. And I'm going to stagger them slightly to create some open space for my title and then some embellishment clusters. I'll push the scenic photo up just a little so I can tuck a 3x4 portrait underneath, and then another 3x4 portrait will sit under it with the map photo in a flip flap. I've got a couple of smaller 2x2 supporting photos as well. These galvanized steel buckets were scattered along the first part of the trail, just hanging on branches of trees here and there. I had to look up the reason for those. This photo, my husband, is there somewhere, and the same thing for this one. You can barely spot me in it. So those buckets, from what I found, it's believed that they were most likely remnants from the region's historical coal mining operations. And I'm placing these 3 photos in a flip-flap. The hamlet was once an important mining community, and many of the hiking paths today actually follow the old routes used by miners. I thought that was a neat bit of history to share. I did some pre-planning for this layout and I even sketched it out. So I already have a good idea of where I'm heading. Once everything's cut to size, I'll come back and share those measurements. For the right side, my brown pattern paper measures 4.5 by 10 inches. And on the left, I've got a piece that's 9.5 by 10 inches square. For the wood grain pattern, I cut an 8 by 8.5 square for the right, and then a narrow 2 by 8.5 strip that I'll tuck just underneath the brown square on the left. The leaf pattern paper, I've got 4 strips total. On the right page, I cut 2 at 2 by 9.5, one for the top and then one for the bottom. And for the left page, they're 2 by 10.5. Again, one for the top and for the bottom. Getting those perfectly lined up is always a challenge, but a little tweaking should do the trick. The landscape photo on the right isn't quite standing out as much as I'd like, so I'm going to cut a mat from the Cajun Craze pattern paper to repeat that color on the left. I'm not sure yet what I'll do, but I'll figure that out as we go. For my title, I pulled out the Celebrate Together stamp set. Yes, I'm using it again. It's been a good investment. I've used it quite a bit, and the sentiment, "A Day to Remember," is perfect for the story I want to tell here. My first thought was to stamp it onto a circle I die cut using one of the circles from the Spotlight on Nature dies, and I could, tuck it in place behind the photos or in front, embellish around it, But then I had another idea. There's this big open space in the sky portion of the photo of James. I thought it would be fun to stamp the title directly onto the photo itself. Some crafters will design the titles digitally in programs like Canva and place the text right on the photo before they print it. So the title is kind of part of the image from the start, and I didn't plan that far ahead. So we're going to do it the old-fashioned way and physically stamp the title onto the photo itself. I've placed my photo snug in the corner of my mini Misty. The stamp is positioned on the door, but I'm not closing it yet. I don't want it to stick to the photo before I'm ready, or it might leave a mark. I just eyeballed it in place first. Now I'm double checking, keeping it slightly to the right since the trees and clouds on the left side of the photo could make the title harder to see. So I'm using StazOn ink. It's made for non-porous surfaces like photos, vellum, or acetate. Just a quick tip, StazOn does require a special cleaner. I've got my stamping scrub and Stampin' Mist ready, but there's also a designated StazOn cleaner that I'd highly recommend. So once I'm done here, I'll give my stamp a really good scrub to help minimize any staining. Regular dye-based inks will just sit on top of a glossy photo and smudge, but StazOn bonds to the surface, giving a clean, permanent image that won't wipe away once it's dry. So now that I'm happy with the placement, I think having the stamp slightly off center will look more visually balanced. I'll move the layout out of the way and start inking up my stamp. I only have StazOn in black or white, and since the white, which is no longer available, wouldn't really show up on my picture, I decided to go with black. Now, I wasn't planning on adding black to the layout since I've been kind of sticking with the earth tone, the earth fall tones here, but that's okay. We'll make it work. Now that the stamp is all inked up, I'll close the door and give the stamp a light, even press. I don't want to push too hard and risk smearing the words. So you want to make sure that you are gentle when you lift the door. The photo can stick a little, and mine did. I'll carefully remove it to avoid any creases. And my first impression wasn't quite crisp enough. So I'll re-ink the stamp and stamp again, following the same steps. This is where having a stamp positioner really comes in handy, though it is not necessary. So I'll ink it back up, close the door. StazOn also comes in the saddle brown color, which is quite close to pecan pie, and it's out of stock at the moment, but I'll be keeping an eye out for that for sure. So to tie everything together, I'll add a few touches of black elsewhere on the layout to match the stamped title. And the second pass turned out beautifully. To balance the Cajun Craze color from the opposite page, I cut a matching mat for the photo of James, this time using cardstock instead. I don't have a piece of the leaf pattern paper large enough for a mat, and I do want to save the smaller scraps for embellishing later. So since we were surrounded by trees on our hike, I thought I'd lean into that woodsy feel even more. I've got a few leftover pieces from the Country Woods collection, and I love bringing in wood grain patterns for my outdoor photos. The texture naturally ties in with the scenery and helps the pages feel cohesive. To draw more attention to the photo with the title, I'm matting it with the wood grain paper. Then I'll repeat that texture on the right page and give the center photo in the column a thin wood grain border too. It's subtle, but it adds just the right amount to balance. Before I move on, I'm inking all the paper edges with early espresso ink and a sponge dauber. It just makes everything pop a little more and gives definition to the layers. While I was off camera, I was moving the photos around a bit. The 3 smaller photos on the right were kind of bugging me. They just felt a little too crammed together. There's some open space under the title photo where I originally thought I would place my journaling, but instead I'm going to move the 2x2 photos there and then overlap the third one slightly with the others around it. And I think that makes a better use of the space and lets everything kind of breathe a little more, so to speak. So the photo of James that I was planning to tuck in the flip flap can now move beside the other 3x4 instead. And I'll still use the flip flap, but now I can fit both my journaling and the map photo inside, which I like better. You may have noticed I removed the Cajun Craze mat from the photo with the stamped title. I do like it better without it. So now for the fun part. Embellishing. I'm using the Gathering Moments stamp bundle. It has these 2 big leaf dies for a maple and an oak leaf. And lucky for me, I had a few leftovers from my last layout I created using this collection. I've got 2 maple leaves cut from Cajun Craze cardstock, already stitched and ink distressed, plus an oak leaf cut from Crumb cake cardstock, also stitched and distressed. And then I have some stamped leaves, mushrooms, and other images from the set, all in coordinating colors, and I cut using the matching dies. I'm starting with the larger pieces, so 1 maple leaf in the upper right corner of the scenic photo, and then another in the bottom left corner of the photo on the left. And I'm pairing that second one with the oak leaf. From the Christmas greenery dies, using this one right here, I cut a few pine sprigs, some from Old Olive and others from crushed curry cardstock. Now I inked them with crumb cake ink and a little bit of Cajun Craze on the tips. Around here, we have a lot of tamarack trees, and their needles turn a beautiful yellowy orange color in the fall before dropping off. And I wanted to mimic that look in my clusters. I'm tucking these sprigs with the leaves in the upper right and lower left cluster. The idea is to make the leaves look like they're gently falling across the page. This is just a rough placement right now, and I'll fine-tune them as we go. I don't mind covering a little of the photos. There isn't anything really important that I'm covering, and I think it adds to the overall aesthetic of the layout. In a previous video, I showed in more detail how I stitched the leaves and stamped these images, and I'll link that at the end of this video for you if you missed it. I'm feeling the second oak leaf is too much in this cluster, and I'll stick with the 2 maples instead. From the Light and Wonders die, I absolutely love the tree border. It cuts out an entire little forest, and using Old Olive cardstock, I cut 1 long strip of trees and then 1 shorter one. And I'm tucking the longer row above the scenic landscape photo and the smaller strip above the photo with the stamp title, so that the trees kind of peek out from behind the tops of the photos, almost like they're part of the background scenery. Then this large leaf here, I'm letting it float over the photo so that it's kind of in the foreground. And I really like this. It adds such a fun layered effect. Just like the leaves, I brushed a touch of ink onto the tops of the trees using the coordinating color for some extra depth. So since there are mountains in my photos, I thought, why not bring some mountains into my layout? So here's a little sneak peek of a new stamp set coming in the online exclusives in November. It's called Outdoor Adventure, and it's packed with great titles, sentiments. There's even like a little L, and I just couldn't resist this one. And of course, I picked up the matching dies too. The set includes this fantastic mountain scene die that cuts the peaks but not the bottoms or the sides. So you can extend it as long or as tall as you would like. And the coordinating stamp that has these 3 trees grouped together, it has some built-in shading, so it looks like the 2 trees are standing in front. I stamped them in Old Olive on white cardstock. You'll notice the new packaging too. So the DVD cases are done and they have been replaced with slim envelopes. So they're quite a bit taller, but they take up much less space in my craft room, which is always a win if you're working in a smaller space like me. The dies do not come on this magnetic sheet though. I did grab these separately from Amazon. Then I cut my mountain range using a scrap of pecan pie cardstock. It's about 4 inches wide by 2.5 inches tall, and I ran it through my machine once, then I shift the die over and cut it again to create one continuous mountainscape. And to give the peaks a little dimension, and I brushed pecan pie ink along the tops. I cut another one for the left side of the layout as well, and now I've mirrored the scenery in my photos, and I love how that ties everything together. I might place those stamp trees here to soften where the mountains and trees end. And then to finish off that mountain range, I had a log round I stamped earlier using crumb cake ink on white cardstock, and that's from the textured timber set. Sadly, it is retired and no longer available, but I think it's one of everybody's favorites. At least it is one of mine. I'm tucking it under the photo and in front of the mountains to cover that edge, and then finishing off that cluster with a few stamped leaves and this little mushroom. So these photos were taken earlier this fall. We set out one afternoon hoping to catch all those beautiful fall colors and just enjoy some time outdoors together. Super happy with this cluster. It looks so good. I want to add a little detail to the lower left cluster, and I couldn't resist bringing in the fluffy squirrel bundle. Now, I purchased the stamp set with the punch, but honestly, the squirrels are simple enough to fussy cut out if you only have the stamps. So the punch cuts one of the squirrels out and a tiny acorn. Now, I stamped a few of each. Let me just try to grab them here. They're not cooperating. Come on, little squirrel. There we go. So I used pecan pie and crumb cake ink for the fill on either, and then early espresso for the outlines on all of them. I even made a little tree stump for one of them to sit on. And I stamped that in early espresso on crumb cake cardstock, and then I fussy cut it out. And then that finishes off the little woodland cluster. So back to the photos. We took some pictures at like an old mine site and then found a trail on the All Trails app that looked promising. It started off great, nice and wide, easy to follow, but the further we went, the rougher it got. ATVs had kind of came through and tore up the muskeg, leaving deep muddy ruts full of water. And then eventually the trail just sort of disappeared. I like to add word sentiments or like little verbal details on my layouts whenever I can. This is from the Tags to Go stamp set, and whatever is still available, I'll link it in the description box below. So I stamped Life's Detours Are Better With You in black ink on white cardstock, and then I cut it into a circle using a die cut from my stash, and it finishes off the section of the mountain scene perfectly and brings a touch of black to the right side of the layout, tying it in with the title. And it was getting a little lost there though, so to help, I cut another circle one size bigger from Early Espresso cardstock, and I'm gonna layer that behind it. And you know what? That did the trick. I still want to repeat that Cajun Craze pattern paper on the left side. And so I went ahead and I cut one tag from the leaf pattern paper and then another from Crumb Cake cardstock. So now, using the Outdoor Adventures die again, let's create a few boot tracks. Small dies like this are such a great way to use up those tiny scraps we all have laying around. I know I have lots. There's two parts to this die. One cuts the outline and the other cuts the treads. I'm using Crumb Cake cardstock for the outline, so I'll go ahead and run that through my machine first. So this is what the first layer looks like. And then for the treads, I'm using Early Espresso cardstock. The die that cuts the treads doesn't include the outline, so you'll want to layer the two together. I'll place the tread die inside the outline die, and then I'll run them through at the same time. If your die tends to shift while you're cutting, I like to use a small piece of washi tape or low tack tape to hold them in place. I'll layer those together with just a few drops of glue, and now I've got some little tracks making their way across the layout. And while I do this, I'll share the last bit of the story. So the trail had completely disappeared, and I have to say thank goodness for the All Trail app, because without it, we might still be wandering out there trying to find our way back. Still, it ended up being a really fun day, and the scenery was beautiful, and it made a great memory for us to share together. But next time, we'll definitely be reading those hike reviews before heading out on our next adventure. I have another sneak peek for you. This is the new 3-banner punch. Pretty self-explanatory, really. Each banner ends a little different. One looks like an arrow, another is dovetailed on both ends, and one has a straight edge and then one side is dovetailed. This will make adding word strips to layouts so much easier. For my banners, I pulled out an old, close to my heart, Cabin Fever stamp set, and I stamped This Way and Scenic Route in black ink. And I'll place one banner over here with this photo, and then the arrow-shaped one will go with the squirrel. It says This Way, like our little friend is pointing out the trail. To finish off the Crumb Cake tag, first I inked the edges with Early Espresso ink, and then I used a piece of Early Espresso twine to match the stitching on the leaves. For the Cajun Craze tag, I used the irregular weave trim. I love the texture this ribbon adds. I snipped the ends on an angle and fold it in half, and then I'll attach it low on the tag with a couple of staples. After a little stash dive, I found 3 wooden chevron arrows that fit perfectly below this photo. I had a little space that I didn't like, and this fills it in nicely. And then to repeat that wooden detail on the right, I'm adding a small heart beside the sentiment, and of course, an acorn. There are pine cones everywhere along the trails. That day, and I mean any trail I've ever been on. So I'm bringing in the Delicate Pines bundle. I have both the stamps and the dies. And then I cut 2 pine cones, one from Pecan Pie and then the other from Early Espresso Cardstock. And this is a layering die. And so one, the lighter color is on the top, and then on the other, it's reversed for some variation. And I decided to swap out the mushroom I had earlier for the pine cones. And I replaced one of the leaves with a different leaf to switch things up. I tucked another set of trees behind the sentiment to give it a bit of height. I did add some foam dimensionals on some of the items, one of the pine cones, and then the leaf in the lower cluster, I did place dimensionals just on the tips. For my photo going inside the flip flap, I attached the photo of the map we followed on all trails, saved our life, to a 3x4 piece of cardstock, white cardstock, and filled in the space below it with just a scrap of the wood grain paper. And then I stamped another set of trees and a sentiment that reads, "What a day." And then the picture of me will go inside the flip flap. And so when you lift it, you'll see the map and then my journaling underneath, which I typed and printed in a 3x4 text box to match the size of the flip flap. For now, to keep the glare down on camera, I'll remove the photo from the flip flaps and just have the one sitting in place. For the finishing touches, I'm using the streaked dot embellishments. They almost look wooden to me, which, fits in perfectly here. And I like to place them in groups of 3 within my clusters, forming a visual triangle around the layout. They do come in 2 different sizes. So if you're enjoying this video, go ahead and hit that like button. That really helps me out here a lot on YouTube. And if you haven't already, I'd love it if you subscribed. I share a new video every week and sometimes twice. And I'd hate for you to miss out on any of this crafty goodness here and inspiration. So that's my finished layout. This one was so much fun to make, and I hope you picked up on a few ideas to try on your next project. And I'm really happy with how the stamped title turned out. A little scary to stamp directly onto a photo, but totally worth it. And how fun are those little boot tracks? I can already tell they'll be showing up on plenty of my future hiking pages. I'm so happy with how it all came together. The layers of fall leaves, the mountain scenes, and the woodland touches really help tell the story of that day. If this project inspired you, I'd love to hear which detail was your favorite down in the comments. Thank you so much for spending this crafty time with me. For still shots of this layout, head over to my Instagram and Pinterest accounts. Don't forget the new online exclusive products, including the Outdoor Adventures bundle and the punch, will be available November 4th. And here's that video I mentioned earlier where I showed how I stitched those leaves and used the Gathering Moments stamp set. Until next time, keep telling your stories, one page at a time.